I did want to hit on, unless you've got something else, Jason, with the Sooners, the Bob Bowlsby announcement this week. So there's not a timetable that's been announced except for a very vague, but still later this year, that Bob Bowlsby's been thinking about this, has communicated this again just in the last 48 hours that he's going to step down from his position as Big 12 commissioner later this week. So here's a guy that took over the conference commissioner's role in 2012, and immediately he had to respond to the Nebraska loss, Texas A&M, Missouri, Colorado. He brought in West Virginia and TCU. And here at the end of his tenure, dealing with Texas and Oklahoma, a much more urgent matter in regards to the relevance of the conference, especially from a football standpoint. And, I gotta say that I think he did about as well as he could in regards to this latest potential crisis of bringing in UCF, Houston, BYU, and Cincinnati. If you look at the landscape of college football, those are about the four strongest programs that you would think were available. And, that might end up being his biggest legacy, was the conference expansion and contraction that he had to deal with right out of the gate. And then at the end of his tenure, 10 years later, had to deal with the same thing, and even more so because of the two marquee programs in the conference leaving.
Yeah, it's been such an ebb and flow type of career for Bowlsby as as the Big 12 commissioner. I think you saw him, I think you saw him being a little bit of what was considered, a wallflower previously, in terms of, I think there was a lot of momentum, probably from Oklahoma and Texas, really kind of driving that, is to get this league back to 12. And, he was never really able to get that done. So I think he was not really a failure point, but I think it was viewed as, maybe he's not one of the strongest, kind of commissioners in the country. And then, I think he gained a lot of, I think, respect nationally, specifically from the ACC and the SEC, where, as you remember, during that COVID year, it was really split. The Pac-12 wasn't going to play, the Big Ten wasn't going to play, the SEC and the ACC had kind of decided, okay, yeah, we're going to play. Big 12 was really the glue that held that season together to begin. So I think he got a lot of respect, and then obviously with what Oklahoma and Texas did, which, I mean, it's not completely his fault. They had a kind of a sense of blindsidedness, I believe, from Bowlsby perspective. But I think that was a red flag as well. But to your point, Mark, he did, and I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, he did as good of a job as you could have expected with what he was able to, rectify from a Big 12 conference perspective, bringing in those schools that you had mentioned, UCF, Houston, Cincinnati, BYU, just to help solidify that conference. And so now you look at it going forward without Oklahoma and Texas, as we've talked about this. I think it's not quite a power, the level of a Power 5 maybe, but it is somewhere in between what a Power 5 is and what the American looks like today. Because you've got, when you look at it, you've got teams like Oklahoma State, obviously still relevant, and from time to time you've got West Virginia and you've got Iowa State, and you don't have a blue blood team, so to speak, but you've got teams that have performed very well as of late. At the college football, at the Power 5, close to the Power 5 level, I should say. So yeah, no, he's done a great job. And I think the most interesting part of this decision here is, what's that time frame look like, and does it do anything to help accelerate the Oklahoma. I think there was a question out here: does it help accelerate the um, Oklahoma and Texas joining the SEC? And it's so hard. I've heard there's a little bit more momentum for Oklahoma and Texas maybe moving into 2023 season. So I think it would probably be, when you look at it, you can look at it at a bunch of different ways, right? You can look at it from Oklahoma and Texas, like, why not stay in the Big 12 for a few more years and you don't have to pay that $50 million. But on the same side of it, you look and see if you move, you're going to start recouping. I mean, it's only going to take a couple of years to start recouping that $50 million with the amount of money that they're going to make. So I mean, it probably makes more sense if you're Oklahoma and Texas to move sooner rather than later, based on that fact. And I think probably when you always, anytime you have a change in leadership that's happening in the Big 12, obviously that person's going to have their ideals that they want to that they want to instill, and maybe it's a point, Mark, where they're saying, okay, we want you guys to move on. We want to move on with what the future is going to be of the Big 12. So maybe it's more amicable, in terms of a breakup than it's had in the past, and um, and so that's going to be interesting conversation, in terms of the timing and really when that happens. But yeah, I think there, like I said, there's some signs starting to point towards maybe 2023 is the season, and it's still, I mean, that's quick. I mean, that's 8 months from now. So when you kind of look at the calendar sports season for 2023, so there's some adjustments that both Oklahoma and Texas are going to make. I mean, no one has the, I don't think there's very many people that have the illusion that Oklahoma and Texas are going to come in and challenge for an SEC championship year one. But I think at least on the Oklahoma side, we'll see what's going on with Texas this year. But I think with everything that they've done with this coaching change and the kind of the things that Venables has said, this is what we need to be able to be successful, be able to compete at an SEC level, that they're starting to do those things. So I think they're in the process of that. So I mean, I think it'll be interesting on the field what these two teams look like. How close are they? Do they still have some major adjustments that they need to make, or are they are they closer? And I think there's a certain belief, Mark, whether that's kind of an artificial belief or whether that's actual reality, is that having that SEC logo on your chest helps so much in recruiting. These recruiting battles that Oklahoma are losing to Texas A&M, or they're losing out to Alabama or whatever that might be. A big difference maker is having that SEC, um, that SEC on your chest, so to speak. So it'll be very interesting this year to see what the time frame of both be moving on, and if Oklahoma and Texas collectively think they're in a position that they're ready to go ahead and move on.